In this journey through time, we will step into the mind of a genius who healed both bodies and souls. Tonight, you will hear the untold letter from Ibn Sina, Avicenna, the philosopher of light, whose wisdom still echoes through the ages. I was born in the year 980 in the small village of Afshana near Bukhara, a place where the winds of Persia met the breath of the Silk Road. The air smelled of earth and parchment, and even as a boy I felt that knowledge was hidden in everything that breathed. My father served as a local administrator under the Samanid Empire, a man of reason and belief, and our home overflowed with conversation, philosophy, mathematics, and the verses of Aristotle and Euclid, spoken in the same breath as the Quran. When I was 10 years old, my teachers confessed they could no longer teach me. I had absorbed all that they knew of geometry, astronomy, and logic, and still my curiosity was not sated. I devoured every manuscript my father possessed, asking questions that even grown men found difficult to answer. Why, I would ask, does the heart beat even when the mind is silent? What is the line between the body that dies and the soul that lives? These were not questions of a child. They were the seeds of my life's work. In Bukhara's great Samanid library, one of the finest in the Muslim world, I first tasted the depth of human thought. The shelves held scrolls from Greece, India, and the lands of Alexandria. There, under candlelight, I met the ghosts of Hippocrates and Galen, learned the mathematics of Ptolemy, and read the words of Aristotle so many times that I began to argue with him in my dreams. Knowledge, I realized, was not merely to be learned. It was to be lived, tested, challenged, reimagined. By the time I turned 16, I had already studied medicine, philosophy, and astronomy with the fervor of a pilgrim seeking truth. Medicine, to me, was not merely the treatment of the body. It was the understanding of the soul's harmony with nature. I observed how the heart responded to sorrow, how the pulse changed with fear, how the mind could heal or destroy its vessel. A physician, I would later write, must see the illness not in the organ, but in the whole being. My first chance to practice came when the Samanid ruler, Emir Nur ibn Mansur, fell gravely ill. The palace physicians had failed to restore him. I was only 17, yet I was summoned to the royal court. I examined the emir carefully, not just his body, but his spirit. I adjusted his diet, prescribed herbs, and guided him in rest and reflection. Within days, his strength returned. In gratitude, the emir offered me wealth, but I asked instead for access to his royal library, a treasure of countless works, some thought lost to time. It became my second home, the crucible of my mind. In the years that followed, my hunger for understanding grew insatiable. I studied Aristotle's metaphysics so intensely that I could recite it by heart, yet its meaning eluded me, until one day I stumbled upon a commentary by Al-Farabi. In those pages, light broke through confusion. I grasped how existence itself could be divided into the necessary and the possible. It was then I began to build the foundation of my own philosophy, that God is the necessary existence, the being that cannot not be, and that all other things, including ourselves, exist only because His will allows it. From this seed, my later works would grow. But even as my name began to travel across Persia and Khorasan, I remained restless. Knowledge without humility is blindness, Often I would retreat from the scholars and courtiers, walking into the stillness of the desert, gazing at the stars. The constellations seemed to whisper that the universe was both knowable and mysterious, an ordered chaos reflecting the Creator's mind. In those moments of solitude, I felt closest to truth. Yet life in those times was never simple. Political unrest forced me to wander from city to city, from Gurganj to Ray to Hamadan. I carried with me a few scrolls, my instruments, and a heart unshaken by exile. Everywhere I went, I taught and healed. The poor came to my door with fevers and wounds, but also with despair. To each I said, "The soul can fall ill, just as the body can. Let your thoughts be your medicine, and your prayers be your rest." In those early years, I began to write what would become my life's most enduring gift. The Canon of Medicine. It started as notes, observations from years of treating patients, reflections on Greek and Arab texts, and my own experiments with anatomy and psychology. I wished not only to heal the sick, but to understand why they fell ill. Health, I believed, was the harmony of the four humours, but beyond that, it was the harmony of the soul and the world. A man who lived in anger or ignorance could not be truly well. And so my journey as a seeker began. From the narrow streets of Bukhara to the vast fields of human thought. I did not know then that my words would cross centuries, that one day in faraway lands they would call me Avicenna. I only knew that truth was endless, and the greatest gift of all was the mind's capacity to wonder. As I grew older, I discovered that the greatest frontier was not the stars, nor the body's organs, but the mind itself. I had seen physicians treat fever and pain, yet remain blind to the deeper sickness that dwells in thought. The soul, I began to believe, was not separate from the body. It animated it, shaped it, and could even heal it. In those years, I worked tirelessly on what would later become the Canon of Medicine. I wrote of anatomy and remedies, but I also wrote of the patient's spirit, of how sadness could dry the pulse, and hope could restore its rhythm. I described contagion before the germ was known, distinguished smallpox from measles, and warned that ignorance of the heart state could ruin the physician's art. I saw medicine as a bridge between heaven and earth, one foot in matter, the other in meaning. But beyond medicine, another question haunted me. What is consciousness? Is it bound to the flesh, or does it float above it like breath upon the air? To explore this mystery, I imagined a man suspended in emptiness, no ground beneath his feet, no air upon his skin, no sound or sight or scent to reach him. I called him the floating man. Would he, deprived of every sense, still know that he exists? Yes, he would know, intuitively, beyond the body, that he is. This, I concluded, was proof that the soul is aware of itself without the body's help. The I am that lives in each of us is not made of flesh. It is pure awareness, the essence of being. My scholars debated this idea endlessly. Some argued I had gone too far. Others whispered that I had touched the secret of creation itself. Yet for me it was simple. The human soul is a mirror polished by reason, reflecting the light of the necessary being. God, who exists by his very nature and sustains all possibility. Still, I did not confine philosophy to parchment. I practiced it in life. When political storms forced me from one city to another, I carried only a few books and a lute. Music, too, was philosophy, a harmony of mathematics and emotion. In quiet evenings, I played melodies that followed the same ratios that govern the heavens. I believed the cosmos itself was music, each star a note, each orbit a rhythm composed by divine intelligence. During my years in Hamadan, I served as physician to the ruler, Shams al-Dawla. There, I balanced science and survival. When not tending the sick, I lectured on logic, metaphysics, and ethics. Students filled the courtyards to hear how Aristotle's thought could live again in the language of Islam. I told them, reason and revelation are not enemies. They are two eyes through which truth is seen whole. At times, my pursuit of truth brought suspicion. Some accused me of arrogance, others of heresy. But I cared little for titles or power. What I sought was coherence, a vision of the universe where physics and faith, medicine and morality were threads of the same tapestry. I wrote the Book of Healing, not to cure the body, but the intellect. It was a vast encyclopedia of logic, mathematics, and metaphysics, written for minds as hungry as my own had been. In it I described knowledge as a ladder. The senses give us rungs of perception. Reason climbs them, and intuition leaps beyond into understanding. The higher one ascends, the closer one comes to the divine source of all knowledge. Often, after long nights of writing, I would look up from my desk and see dawn seeping into the sky. The call to prayer would echo through Hamadan, mingling with the rustle of paper and the fading scent of ink. In those moments I felt a peace that no empire could grant, a certainty that knowledge, pursued with humility, is itself a form of worship. And so, the mind and the soul became for me not two domains, but one. The mind observes the world, the soul understands its meaning. Together they shape the human being, the only creature who can both question and adore. In the later years of my wandering, I began to understand that philosophy was not merely a collection of ideas, but a way of living in harmony with truth itself. The rulers of Ray, Isfahan, and Hamadan debated politics and power. I debated the nature of being. What does it mean to exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? These questions burned brighter in me than any candle. My studies of Aristotle and Al-Farabi had shown me that reason is the most noble faculty of man. Yet reason alone cannot touch the origin of existence. And so I asked, if the universe is filled with change, birth, decay, the motion of stars, then what keeps it from dissolving into chaos? There must be something constant, eternal, uncaused. I called this the necessary being, that whose essence is existence itself. All other things, from the smallest grain of sand to the mind that contemplates it, are possible beings. They exist only because the necessary being wills them to. For me, God was not a distant monarch upon a throne, but the very pulse of existence, the first cause that sustains all motion. To know God, one need not abandon reason. One must perfect it. Faith and philosophy, I said, are not rivals, but reflections of the same light. Revelation gives form to what reason glimpses. When I read the Quran, I did not see conflict with logic. I saw completion. Each verse was a mirror held up to the intellect, inviting it to see the divine pattern within creation. Some theologians accused me of rationalizing the sacred, but I believed the intellect was itself sacred. How could the Creator gift humanity with thought and then forbid its use? I wrote, "The intellect is the prophet within. For the ignorant man, the world is a prison. For the wise, it is a garden whose every leaf speaks of God." In my meditations, I often envisioned existence as a series of concentric circles. At the center is the necessary being, pure, self-sufficient, beyond time and space. From that source emanates the active intellect, through which the forms of all things flow into matter. The human soul, positioned between matter and intellect, is both bound and free, bound by the body, free in contemplation. When the soul purifies itself through knowledge and virtue, it ascends toward the divine intellect, regaining its original luminosity. This vision shaped not only my metaphysics, but also my ethics. If every soul longs to return to its source, then moral life is the discipline of remembering what we truly are. Virtue is not obedience to command, but alignment with truth. When one acts with justice, one imitates the harmony of the cosmos. When one seeks knowledge, one participates in creation itself. In this way, study becomes prayer, and healing becomes worship. During my years in Isfahan, I shared these ideas with students who came from across the Muslim world. They filled the courtyards, their ink pots clinking, their eyes bright with curiosity. I told them that learning begins in wonder and ends in humility. To know, I said, is to see that you are small before the vastness of truth. Many of them would carry these words east and west, translating them into Latin, spreading them to lands I would never see. At times I faced imprisonment and exile for my writings. In Hamadan, my books were nearly burned. In Gurganj, I was accused of heresy. Yet even in the darkness of a cell, I continued to write on scraps of cloth and shards of bone. For truth cannot be confined. Knowledge is a flame that survives the hand that holds it. When illness struck, I studied my own decline with the same curiosity I once gave to the stars. Pain, I discovered, sharpens perception. As my body weakened, my understanding of the soul grew stronger. I saw death not as an end, but as a continuation, an ascent from the shadow of matter into the light of pure being. The philosopher does not fear death. He greets it as a return to his origin. I often thought of the floating man again. Even in this failing flesh, I felt the certainty of that inner I am. The senses fade, the mind flickers, but awareness endures. That enduring spark is the proof that we are more than dust. It is the whisper of eternity within us. Thus did faith and philosophy reconcile in my heart. I worshipped the Creator, not through ritual alone, but through contemplation. I prayed in words and in thought, in silence and in discovery. Every theorem proved, every illness cured, every truth understood was an act of devotion. As the years passed and my hair turned white, I began to sense that knowledge, like the body, must one day return to its source. I had written nearly 450 works on logic, astronomy, chemistry, music, psychology, geometry, and the healing arts. Yet I knew that no man, not even one who spent a lifetime in pursuit of truth, could capture more than a few drops from the ocean of the divine mind. In my final years, I settled in Hamadan, serving once more as physician and advisor to the rulers of Persia. The city was a meeting place of scholars, soldiers, and poets. By day I taught, by night I wrote, copying manuscripts by lamplight as the scent of ink filled the air. Pain in my stomach began to trouble me. and though I diagnosed it as colic from overwork, I refused to rest. The soul, I told my students, is not nourished by sleep, but by understanding. When I could no longer ride a horse, I traveled in a litter, carrying my books beside me. One of them, Al-Qanun fil Tib, the Canon of Medicine, had become the foundation of medical science from Cairo to Cordoba. In it, I described hundreds of remedies, theories of contagion, and methods of clinical observation that would guide physicians for centuries. Yet what pleased me most was that the canon taught compassion, to see the patient not as a collection of parts, but as a living harmony of body and soul. At the same time, I continued to refine my great philosophical synthesis, Kitab al-Shifa, the Book of Healing. Its name often misleads. It is not a manual for doctors, but for minds. I meant it as a healing of ignorance, a guide to logic, physics, metaphysics, and ethics. I argued that true knowledge unites reason and faith, showing how the world flows from the necessary existence, like light from the sun. The closer we draw to that source, the more luminous our intellect becomes. Even in illness, I dictated chapters to my pupils, my voice trembling but my mind clear. Write quickly, I told them, for my time grows short. I no longer sought perfection, only continuity. Ideas, after all, do not die. They migrate from one language to another, from one age to the next. Already my works were being copied in Arabic and Persian, later to be translated into Latin. In distant Europe, men I would never meet would call me Avicenna, and my canon would become their standard of medicine for more than 500 years. Sometimes, when the pain subsided, I would step into the courtyard and watch the night sky above Hamadan. The constellations that had guided my youth still shone unchanged. I felt both small and infinite, as if part of the same geometry I had spent my life trying to understand. Perhaps, I thought, the purpose of wisdom is not to master the universe, but to see oneself rightly within it. I died in the year 1037, at the age of 57, during a journey to Isfahan. My body was laid to rest in Hamadan, near the road I had traveled so often in search of learning. Yet my spirit, if spirit is the name for consciousness freed from flesh, remains in every act of inquiry, in every question whispered beneath the stars. For the philosopher's true monument is not marble or gold, but the curiosity he awakens in others. Across centuries, my words would reach scholars such as Thomas Aquinas and Roger Bacon, who built upon my arguments for the unity of faith and reason. Physicians in the universities of Paris and Padua would study my canon as their daily bread. And beyond the halls of learning, ordinary men and women would live longer, think deeper, and see farther because of ideas born in the silence of my study. If you are listening now, perhaps in a world I could scarcely imagine, remember this: every discovery begins with wonder, and every wonder is a prayer. Do not fear to question. Do not tire of thinking. The mind, like the universe, expands without end. Ibn Sina, the seeker from Bukhara, the healer of bodies, the philosopher of souls, speaks to you still through the chain of minds that refused to let the flame go out. And if my life holds any lesson worth keeping, it is this: knowledge is not possession, it is participation. We are not owners of truth, but guests at its table. So learn and teach, heal and reflect. And may the light that once guided me through the deserts of Persia guide you too through the mysteries of your own time.